For category B projects, as I mentioned earlier, the projects are granted clearance at the state level. The agency that is the final regulatory body, or the body which grants the final clearance, is the State Environment Impact Assessment Authority, or SEIAA, which is responsible for actually granting the clearance as well as for monitoring the compliance of conditions in the clearance. Very similar to the work that is done by the MOEF with regard to the category A projects. Similar to the expert appraisal committees that we just discussed, we have the state expert appraisal committees, SEACs, at the state government level to give recommendations to the SEIAA based on appraisal of different documents such as the EI report and the public consultation minutes of the hearing. The third set of institutions is the state pollution control boards. These are pollution control boards set up at every state. These are responsible for organizing public hearings, and which is an important part of the public consultation process. They are also assisted by the local administration, for instance, the district collector, the subdivisional magistrate, the Zilla Parishad. All these institutions at the local level are also involved in the environment clearance process to a certain extent, particularly at the public consultation stage. The final institution that is important for our purpose is the National Green Tribunal, which is a specialized court based in New Delhi, but with different branches across the country, which hears matters and decides matters with regard to the environmental clearance process. And we'll come to the role of the National Green Tribunal towards the end of our presentation today. Now, as I said in the beginning, the crux of this notification of 2006 is that the environmental clearance has to be obtained prior to the commencement of any operation. Any new project or expansion of an existing project or modernization of an existing project or capacity enhancement requires such an environmental clearance. In August 2010, the MOEF clearly stated that projects which have not received environmental clearance cannot undertake any form of activity, including civil construction or cutting down or felling of trees. Projects which have not got environmental clearance but do have access to the project land, the maximum they can do is fence the land and to prevent encroachment, and to construct a temporary guard shed if necessary. Other than that, no other activity is permitted at the project site unless an environmental clearance is obtained. To begin the process, the project proponent or the company owner submits a number of documents to the relevant regulatory agency. As I said before, for category A projects, that would be the Ministry of Environment and Forest, Climate Change at the central government, and if it is a category B project, these documents would be submitted to the SEIAA, or the State Environment Impact Assessment Authority. Now, what are these documents? Form 1 and Form 1A in case of construction projects. These two forms provide the basic information about the project, such as where is the project situated, what is the capacity of the project, what are the raw materials that will be required in the project, who are the people who will be affected, what kind of employment will be generated. So, basic information about the project. The project proponent will also, along with the Form 1 or Form 1A, submit what are known as the draft terms of reference. Draft terms of reference, or TORs, are proposed by the project proponent as what would form the basis of their EI report. What are the terms or what are the criteria based on which the project proponent proposes to undertake the EI study? Along with that, a pre-feasibility report would also be submitted. All this information is then put forward to the expert appraisal committee in case of category A projects, and in case of category B projects, it would be forwarded to the state expert appraisal committee. Now, we have the 4 broad stages of the EI process. The first stage is called the screening stage. This stage is relevant only to category B projects. At this stage, the State Expert Appraisal Committee looks through the documents that have been submitted by the project and decides whether this is a category B1 project or B2 projects. And this is based on the nature and location of the project and certain guidelines that the MOEF has given. The distinction between B1 and B2 projects is that B1 is considered to be higher in magnitude, higher in potential impacts, and B2 is considered to be relatively smaller. And because B2 projects are relatively smaller, these are not required to undertake an EIA study or an environmental impact assessment study. However, as you must remember, screening, the stage of screening, which is the first stage in the process, is not relevant to category A projects. It is only for category B projects. The second stage of the process is what is known as the scoping. At this stage, the Expert Appraisal Committee or the State Expert Appraisal Committee in case of category B projects will consider all the documents that have been submitted by the project proponent. It may even consider undertaking a site visit, although that is optional, not mandatory. And based on these documents and its experience, because as I said earlier, these committees include experts, they will issue the final terms of reference. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the terms of reference are the basis on which the environmental impact assessment studies are carried out. So, therefore, they define the ambit of the impact assessment studies. So, the expert appraisal committees can propose their own terms of reference. They can customize or revise the terms of reference that had been submitted by the project proponents. If these TORs are not properly assessed, or if these TORs are not properly addressed in the EI report that the project proponent prepares, the EAC or the SEACs can even reject the proposed project proposal. Therefore, I just want to emphasize on the importance of the terms of reference in the whole process. The project proponents have to respond to every term of reference that is issued to it. At the scoping stage, which is stage 2 itself, the EAC or the SEAC can decide to reject the project itself. It can decide this based on the documents if it believes that the adverse impacts on the environment will not be mitigated by the project and are too high and irreversible in nature for the project to be carried out. So, at the second stage, the scoping stage itself, the project proposal can be rejected and the project proponent or the company has to be given reasons by the expert appraisal committees and the MOEF or the SEIAA why their project has been rejected. After the scoping is over and the terms of reference has been issued to the project proponent, the project proponent engages an external agency such as an environmental consultant to undertake an environmental impact assessment study for the proposed project. These studies could take varying lengths of time. They could, it could be a rapid environmental impact assessment, which means it's undertaken only over one season. It could be a comprehensive EI report, which means that the environmental impacts over the whole year or all seasons have been considered before preparing the report. Most project proponents prefer the rapid EIA because it's undertaken in a shorter period of time, although it could be said that it is not an adequate impact assessment because it doesn't take into account seasonal variability. Once these assessment studies are over, a draft EI report is prepared and along with a summary of 10 pages is submitted by the project proponent. Now we come to the third stage of the process, which is the public consultation, which I referred to briefly earlier. The public consultation has been defined as the process by which the concerns of local affected persons and others who have plausible stake in the environmental impacts of the project or activity are ascertained with a view to taking into account all material concerns in the project or activity design as appropriate. However, certain projects such as building and construction projects, townships, individual projects within big industrial estates, B2 category projects, certain expansion projects need not undertake public consultation. However, projects such as thermal power plants, mining projects, hydropower projects, nuclear, airports, massive industries, all these projects and development activities, infrastructure activities require public consultation. Public consultation under the EI process has two stages. The first is that of public hearing, where at the site of the project or close proximity to the site of the project, the State Pollution Control Board organizes a hearing. The second stage is where written responses or representations are sought from concerned persons who may have a plausible stake in the environmental aspects of the project. Now, these people who are involved in submitting written responses need not be people who are directly affected by the project or who live in close proximity to the project. They could be anyone who has any interest or plausible stake in the matter.